We are absolutely delighted to welcome you today onto the next stage of our International Growth Programme. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Liam Higgins, and I'm leading for the UK and Ireland as an International Growth Specialist. Delighted to be speaking to you today, and I'm also delighted to have Rachita, who's leading for the Northern European market, join me today also.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. After a successful onboarding and educational series, we are excited to enter the next phase of the International Growth Program and put these into practice with this workshop. This is an international growth how to pitch workshop where we would leave you with a go-to-market strategy and a series of decks and information and tools that you can put to practice to leave your client with a strong international growth strategy moving forward. I'm going to share my screen and we'll start the presentation from there. So this entire session is essentially going to be a hypothetical example of a fantasy company. And taking this example, we will walk you through various ways of pitching an international growth strategy to the client and using various tools and resources to put them into a very informative deck moving forward. Essentially, what we want to cover with you today is the export journey. And any export journey that you begin with your client or at your agency is a 5-step process. And the first step, of course, is that you identify the right client. You also try to ask them the right questions. You discover very valuable insights and tell the story, and then ultimately launch very, very successful campaigns with the client itself. And this playbook is essentially for you to leave with the 5-step process, which is an indicative and baseline to your strong pitch processes in the future. We will be sharing this with you after the live stream, and you would notice there are a series of discovery questions that you can start asking your clients to pivot your conversations in a very effective way towards everything international growth. You can also choose one of the 2 structural plays to customize based on the client's status and need to understand where they want to be in the next stage of their growth process, and then ultimately size these opportunities using our incredible tools, and ultimately watch the client succeed and garner fame and fortune. And the agenda for today is basically a 3-step process. So Liam is going to talk to us about all the opportunities that exist in current markets and how to size those opportunities and talk to your client about it. I'm going to move forward with what could you do about high potential new markets that you haven't been aware of before or you haven't analyzed before. And then we'll cover the next steps and leave you with a very strong resource to look back to and start creating your client pitches. And from here, over to Liam.
Thanks, Rach. So as Rach discussed there, we have a couple of different links to discovery questions that help you to understand your client's readiness before looking to pitch an international growth strategy to them. As you would have seen before in the previous webinars and the onboarding event, what we're really looking to focus on throughout this program are some of the easier ways to work it. So looking at 2 options in particular, growing our clients in existing markets, and then also looking at expanding into a couple of new markets for clients who are already exporting. This way we find it's those kind of short to mid-term opportunities that are a little bit easier to go around. But what I'm going to hone in on with you now is incremental growth in the markets that you're already targeting, which can often be quite difficult without being native to that market. So a couple of the ways that we like to look at this and those short to mid-term opportunities is 1, looking at parity pitches or looking at benchmarking essentially versus either other competitors in the market or from a product perspective as well. And then the other side of that is being able to add languages to your existing markets or into new markets as well. So this is generally the area where we look for that low-hanging fruit. There's not necessarily a big sell or a strategic push involved because your clients are already exporting to these countries or are already investing in these markets. But small actions that we can take and push the client to make in order to achieve significant growth in these chosen markets becomes quite simple here. So this is a really simple graph to start off with, but it's a good opportunity to really highlight the additional demand for your clients' products with a clear takeaway. That takeaway is that we're missing the bulk of the demand by just showing domestically. So this is easy to find information in Market Explorer. And you need to create the graph yourself, but again, really, really simple, and there's step-by-step guides on how we do that. But in order to customize this, use Market Explorer, go through your usual steps of inserting the client's category, setting countries to all countries. And then what we're looking to do from there is to download that data either to a Google Sheet or to an Excel file. But in order to do that, to be able to create this graph, change the data set to values, add up all of the category interests for all the countries that you've selected, and calculate what percentage of that belongs to the domestic market, and then just take away from the remainder in order to get that international query share percentage. Although this is a good opening point, we need to translate those percentages into the language that our clients speak. And for the most part, that will be revenue, and looking at that big revenue opportunity available to them by looking at expanding in those new markets or in those existing markets. And this data is actually taken from a really successful internal case study as well. So speaking about budgets with clients is never an easy conversation, and forecasting in new markets isn't the easiest of tasks either. We tried to simplify that by allowing you guys to use Market Explorer to highlight your competitive edge as an agency, but more importantly, to grab the attention of your clients very early on in the meeting by showing them the revenue opportunity out there for their business. So again, we've created a how-to guide step by step in terms of exactly how to do this. The three tools that we use here are Market Scorecard and a Data Studio dashboard that you can create, which we can go through at a separate time. Market Explorer, and then Google Ads and Analytics as well. So just had to mute you there, Rasha. There's a bit of feedback in there. But in terms of this number, so if we do just go back one slide quickly, what we want to do is to avoid in-depth discussions about exactly where this figure comes from until the end of your pitch. The idea of this big number is to just get them bought in early to the data that you're about to present them. So the approach is relatively simple. We index our domestic market by making it equal to 100. We benchmark the market size or the opportunity versus the investment level in each of those markets. So when we find that headroom, we can multiply by the click-through rate, then by the conversion rate, and then multiply it by their average order value in order to find that opportunity on that headroom. So the key part for you here is to help your clients to visualize that opportunity and to look to break it down market by market. And we know that the opportunities per market, and using the data that you have from Google Ads or Analytics, we also know what the level of investment is in each of those. So what we can look to do here is to create a clear comparison to show them very clearly where we can find big pockets of growth and maybe where their investment level doesn't match the opportunity. And again, really highlight that opportunity through very clear takeaways on the screen as well. So here's the how-to, but a couple of other important areas to consider here are inclusions of data points such as conversions, CPA, ROAS, conversion rates, and so on. I said earlier about speaking in the language of your clients being really important, and sometimes these are the metrics that are really important to them. So if we can show that things like conversion rate is the equivalent or higher in non-domestic markets, then it should be an absolute no-brainer to go after that market share and to increase investment in that market. So again, if you just take a second to look at this graph, to give you a bit of an idea first, the market share is on the left-hand side of the bar charts and our customers' data is on the right-hand side. Now, this is all about benchmarking and creating that parity. But it's also really important for creating a sense of urgency with the client. And what we are looking to highlight here is where they consider the key area to invest versus their peers in the industry. So we often see that international growth strategies as being shopping first, which is brilliant for understanding the initial traction for your product or service in a new market. But what we're trying to avoid here is the plateau that can follow soon after. So incorporate this type of data and provide recommendations specifically for that, so that we can benchmark around where the click share is. Is it in text ads? Is it in shopping? And that allows us to change our investment type as well. So we can do most of this ourselves, but this step you will actually need to reach out to your account management team for a bit of additional support in terms of data points. So they will be able to provide you that breakdown on the PLA versus text ad click distribution. And then you'll also need to request the translations of ad copy from your account management team or from ourselves in order to help them to break through that glass ceiling or that plateau of growth by getting things localized. One of the most simple tools that is often overlooked is Google Trends. But when we're looking for up-to-date, fresh insights on an industry, it perfectly complements the narrative that we're creating throughout this deck. The opportunity has been there and growing over time, and you still haven't acted on it as a business. So again, look to use Google Trends reports to be able to create clear takeaways for your client and to back up that maybe slightly outdated insights that you already have, with that outdated data that you already have, to give them kind of fresh daily looks at how it backs it up. So we've actually created a document to make this even easier to do, rather than just going to Google Trends itself, and allows you to create comparisons focusing on three key areas. So if we go on to the next slide, you'll be able to see them. So what they primarily look at is changes by country, changes over time, and then also changes by category. So the green areas here will highlight the areas where you have to input information, and then it will actually output that into various graphs for you as well, giving you the key indicators for each of those three different areas. Now, I mentioned low-hanging fruit at the beginning of this piece as well, and how we're looking to go after that through this type of strategy, and this would be one of the first areas to look at. So we can start by adding the domestic language of a certain market to campaigns targeting new markets. So, for example, advertisers in the UK, naturally all of their ad copy is going to be in English. So an easy opportunity for them is to go after rest of world campaigns targeting same language markets, such as the US, such as Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, and so on. And that's a brilliant initial strategy, which is much, much simpler to do once you obviously have the operations piece set up as well. The other option here is to then add complement languages. So phase 2, to prevent that glass ceiling, is adding these new languages to our campaigns to make sure that we're going after the majority of the population if we do decide to go into markets such as Germany or Netherlands from the UK, making sure that we're catering for everybody in that market and that they understand what your offering is as a business as well. Here we've just created a list. Again, this is a non-exhaustive list and is just an example of some of the key regions that we saw as well. Feel free to take this, add to it as well yourselves, but just a good base point to start with as well. So I suppose next piece, and this is how do we quantify this? And how do we quantify that opportunity by taking our English campaigns and bringing them to new markets, or maybe looking at getting things translated as well. So the way that we've split this is into live countries versus not live European markets. So generally, what we'll see a lot of advertisers doing is actually looking to set up those shopping campaigns or those search campaigns in English, again, for example, into some of the key markets such as Spain, Germany, and Netherlands. And that can actually give a big boost in volume, just from doing it through English. So, for example, when we look at this company, it gave them an additional volume boost of about 21%. But then when they looked at the rest of the non-English speaking countries, just by creating a rest of Europe campaign with the English ad copies, they were able to actually boost their overall volume by an additional 51%. So simple as that, copying those ad copies and copying those campaigns, bringing them into new markets that are relatively close by, has a big opportunity to give you that boost in volume if your clients are pressing you for it, without actually getting anything translated at all. Again, if we go on to the next page with just a little bit of a how-to in terms of how we found this data, and to add to this argument, one thing that I would really recommend is to cross-reference the traffic from Google Analytics to back up your strategy even further with their own data. If we start to see that a lot of traffic is coming from those markets, conversions are starting to dip in from those markets as well, it's a brilliant way to back up your argument. What we can also find from the likes of Market Explorer here as well is the percentage of query share in each of those languages, which allows us to then not only understand the opportunity in terms of volume boost in English, but then how can we go one step further when we actually look to translate into the native language as well. So all of these approaches can be combined to form a cohesive pitch, or you can take different parts from across it in order to cater to a specific client. So that investment versus market size piece is always a brilliant conversation starter and a hook, as well as that big effective $63 million opportunity. Now, naturally, that's not going to be the case for all of your clients, but look to use something equally as effective there as well. But then we can also look into the split between channels and find some of that information from your account management team, but also from the likes of Market Explorer and Market Finder as well. And then let's look at how we can look to size up the total potential, both in our existing language, and then also look at some new languages there as well. And then be able to create that kind of cohesive international growth strategy to really optimize what you're already doing in high potential markets. So at this point is where we come back to that big figure at the beginning and how we actually look to find that and to calculate it and to bring in that forecasting piece to be able to back up our pitches here as well. So I would always use this to back up any of the findings and then actually look to break it down by market in order to be able to help our clients or advertisers to prioritize which markets they wish to go into. So in order to do this, essentially what we look to do is determine the relative available volume for the client's categories in each country using Market Explorer. With Market Explorer or Market Finder, then we can also determine that relative CPC and then use the client benchmarking with the domestic country versus these other markets as a baseline to calculate what the likely impressions, likely clicks, and the likely cost is going to be. And then we can go one step further to actually use the client's own conversion rates and the client's own average order value to calculate that estimated revenue piece and then incorporate it in here as well to really highlight that opportunity for them. And again, in the next slide, this is just breaking it down one step further, showing you exactly where to find that information and how to put it into practice. And with that, I'll actually pass you back on to Rachita to bring you through how we look at potential new markets.
Thank you so much, Liam. And now we're going to talk about the potential new markets. These are markets that your clients have never entered into, never advertised in, never operated in. There might be a lot of preconceived notions about the market, which is either stopping them from entering it, or there is knowledge that is incomplete about those markets. But what we really want you as an agency to step up on is to provide very recent, correct, and accurate information about new markets, and also helping your clients decide and drop the confusion if there are multiple markets on that list, which basically means strong prioritization of markets and what makes sense when. And essentially, this is what we call footprint expansion. Footprint expansion essentially helps us assess the market opportunities across the multiple markets that we want to get into. And then we would calculate that opportunity, leverage Google to consult on a lot of operational hurdles that a client might face when they're entering a new market, and then ultimately optimize the campaigns. Essentially, our offering goes from being able to support you on everything media to also being able to support your client on everything non-media, to be able to give them a very holistic view of what their growth in an international market could look like. I'm sure some of you would have seen this graph before, and if not, this is from Market Explorer, a tool you all can get access to. Essentially, across 5 metrics from category interest to Google query coverage, the idea is to put weights across each of these particular categories and metrics. Once you do put weights, there are countries that are listed that basically come up with a country score. And in this particular example, when we tried doing it for Fantasy Company, we basically realized that US, Poland, and Turkey look the most promising markets to enter. And this is the answer only when we do our full weightage to category interest and half the weightage to category interest growth and three-fourths of the weightage to category cost. The trick is that the moment you change your weight, your country prioritization could significantly change. And how do you weigh these how do you put these weights completely depend on your client's goals and industry. So I'll take 2 examples here. So for example, if your client is in a very heavy competitive industry, you definitely want to make sure that the barriers to entry in terms of cost and competition are reduced, which means you give the highest weight to category cost and Google query coverage, while very low weight to category interest per capita. On the other hand, if the client is completely branding focused, you want to give the highest weight to YouTube reach and very high weight to category interest per capita, but very low weight to GDN unique users and category interest. And similarly, if it's a luxury goods industry, GDP per capita, GDP growth, and category interest per capita become your primary weighing metrics. Keep in mind that less is always more. When you're doing this exercise of putting weights to each of these metrics, it's always good to also mention your top 10 countries that you want to go after. If you pre-select the countries, the output that comes after weighing is always closer to your pre-selection. So it's not going to give you ideas of expansion in a country where the client has no scope to expand. And this is essentially what the graph looks like once you put all the ways in nature. So in this particular example, if you look at the first graph, you would see that your high potential markets could be US, Brazil, and Poland. Now, US has the highest category interest, which of course makes it a very lucrative option. But if you look at Brazil, it's fairly good on category interest and fairly good on category interest growth as well, which also makes Brazil a very lucrative option. And specifically, what stood out for me was that Poland has very high category interest growth, even though the category interest in, say, is little less. And essentially, then you can help prioritize the client by helping them understand where their good volume and strong growth could come from. Similarly, in the second one, if you've given the highest weight to category cost and Google query coverage, you would see that in terms of cost and competition, Turkey, Brazil, Poland, and Croatia come out to be the 4 countries that have the lowest barrier to entry because they have minimum category cost and very high category query coverage. And that's essentially what you could use as information, which is indicative in nature of what you should be going after as your next best potential market. The how-to part is fairly easy. Once you do have access to Market Explorer, you can just simply choose the metrics that you want to go after based on your client's priorities and the category that they operate in. And once you choose your metrics, the system basically pulls up the 2 top metrics that you weight the highest and gives you your low-hanging fruits where you can have low competition and where you can have high demand. And this bubble chart is completely adaptable to your needs. And the only single tool we used to get this information was Market Explorer. And then it's very easy to then indicate this and present it in the form of a graphical representation to essentially let your client know the kind of investment they need to be doing in each of these domestic markets, and also compare it with your domestic markets to help them get a comparison of your CTRs, traffic, volume, and investment per quarter between traditional domestic market and your international market. And in this particular case, you'd notice that Poland, Brazil, and Turkey represent a better expected return than Germany, which was the domestic market. And that gives us a very lucrative opportunity to give us an investment to those countries more than the domestic one. And you can always represent this data on a yearly basis or a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, whichever way your client would prefer. And the how-to part is significantly easy. The two data sources that we ended up using was, of course, Market Explorer and then your Google Ads and Analytics data. Of course, this graph needs to be made manually, but you can source all this information and put them in an Excel sheet in terms of indexing reference to domestic as your index market, and then benchmark the market sizes and category cost against the domestic market. So we are attaching a sheet which would give you a fairly easy way of doing that and assessing what the investment figures should and could look like. And then we take it to the next step. As I mentioned before, that we wanted to support each and every one of you and each and every one of your client on not just media, but all the opportunities that exist beyond media, and something that crosses the mind of you and your client way before they start thinking about media investment. And that's where we are going to take into look very closely of our information that is available very readily on All Right. So in case of Brazil and Poland, we would see that 67% and 76% of their online of their country audience is online. And we'd see that it's only mobile that's significantly growing, with the Poland mobile rate growing at 36% and Brazil growing at 13%. This is a very clear indicator that there is a clear preference of mobile in these two countries. So anything that we want to do as a next step in terms of website development, localization, assets building needs to be very, very mobile friendly. And then these graphs could be very indicative of what the increase in traffic could look like. And if you would try to compare the traffic with CPCs, you'd particularly notice that in this case for Brazil, their CPCs are kept at a similar level, even though the traffic is increasing, which means it's always a good lucrative opportunity for the client to spend lesser amount but get more traffic. And then June becomes a very good month to launch in that market. And then similarly for Poland, you would notice that the regular peaks come in Q4, but the CPCs are actually not growing in Q4. So for all the for all the clients who want to expand into Poland, especially during Q4, it could be a very lucrative option, especially for retail and e-commerce. And then all the previous information was easily sourced from Market Explorer, but we want to take it to the next level and also want to help you identify information about these markets, which is beyond media, beyond CPCs, that you can easily get from Market Finder. Market Finder is our second tool, which is external in nature. And the moment you have a sign up process for it, you can easily access all this information. And in this case, as an example, what you can really gather from the information is that in Poland, the monthly searches across the categories of your choice is about $6.5 million. $6.5 million. And they have a household net disposable income of $23,000. And they have a recommended bid, which is very low because there is low competition. And then in terms of ease of doing business index, it ranks at number 40. You can also try to build an online profile for the country in terms of their Android and iOS usage, what is the logistics that you want to go after, their broadband subscription, the internet population, and a lot of metrics that could basically help you determine a lot of decision making in the particular country that you want to enter into. And in terms of how to, there are simple 5 tools that we've used to put this opportunity across of entering a new market, starting from Market Explorer to identify the market, to Market Finder, where you find all the information related to operations and logistics, and then use the Google Ads, Google Analytics, and Google Trends data to understand the search term trends. And then Think with Google and Grow My Store are our one-stop shop for having a checklist for retail websites and all forms of insights and data that you might be missing out in sharing to your clients. All these 5 tools are externally available. Market Explorer is the only one on which you would need access in case you don't have it so far, but all the other tools should be readily available for you to use right now. And then once the market prioritization is done, and in this case, if it's a very search heavy client, this is our suggested campaign setup for new markets. We do understand that localization could be a lengthy process, but what we do determine is that you need to and you must translate 3 of your main campaigns into the local language. And as Liam shared, the Google Campaign Translator tool is a very easy way of getting those translated by us. Dynamic search campaigns could be a very easy way of monitoring the incoming search terms and also adapting it into the language and campaigns accordingly with a customized headline. And then smart shopping and smart display could be our products that easily automate your campaigns right from day one. And of course, you see the light blue box with YouTube mentioned. So in case it's a branding client, we do understand that priorities could change. But then we do have avenues to explore YouTube in terms of video and display inventory in local languages as well. And this is where localization of campaigns becomes very easy with our Google's Campaign Translator tool. Your account teams should be able to support you in requesting this translation on your behalf with a turnaround time of 4 business days. It's very high quality translations that you would receive across 200 languages or the languages of your choice. And this is supported across search, display, and app campaigns in terms of ads, keywords, site link extensions, and call out extensions. And once the localization is done, what we do want to leave you with is our Global Business Solutions offering, which essentially is a consultation that we can provide to your client, which is across the 4 main themes of localization, customer experience, payments, and logistics. This essentially is an operational consultation that is very beneficial for the international marketing decision makers at the client end. We do a very in-depth audit across the client's country of preference and go into depth of supporting them on the 4 themes so that they are fully ready and prepared to enter the new market. To be able to get these GBS consultations, you can reach out to Liam and I for helping these set up for you. And then once the operational hurdles are also resolved for the country is determined, and we finally have to estimate the opportunity and provide it to the client, it's the easiest to provide it into the form of a tabulated version where you mention the countries with the recommended investment and what they can expect in terms of impressions, clicks, and conversions. This, of course, is fully modifiable depending on what you're pitching to the client. And in the end, what we do recommend is preparing this sort of a business readiness checklist and scoring them out of 5 on each country in terms of their localization across website and campaigns, the country-specific payment options, offline operations, and any in-market sales team that they could need support with. This essentially gives them a clear idea of where they can prioritize and quickly start operations versus which markets have more homework to do. And from here, I would pass it on to Liam.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And Rach, that was really in depth and very, very clear. So thank you very much for helping out on that as well. At this stage then, just I suppose before we go into our own next steps, one of the most beneficial things that I've found from this, and something that I feel is massively overlooked in a lot of the meetings that I've been in, both from myself and from other people in it as well, is determining those next steps when it comes to pitching these international growth strategies to your clients. Be aware of what the key steps are in advance of the meeting or in advance of the pitch, and actually be able to agree on the call or in the room when things do go back to normal as well. What are those key next steps in order to actually be able to start to gather momentum on this? So do make sure that you have that as part of your pitch. But that is all from us today, and we really hope that you found it beneficial. And we're really sorry that we couldn't be there in person to do it with you and maybe extend it out a little bit further for questions and so on. but we're absolutely delighted to be making our way through the International Growth Programme. And we've been so impressed with some of the early success stories that we've heard from yourselves and from some of the other agencies across the programme as well. But today we hope that you've walked away with a better understanding of 3 key things. So discovering opportunities to pitch and how to approach them, effectively utilizing Google's tools and resources that are available to you through this program in constructing your pitch, and highlighting effective third-party data sources to help to support those insights even further. Alongside that, you're going to walk away with a playbook and a guide, as well as a sample output deck that you'll be able to use and adapt when it comes to your own clients. And I do hope that you've been thinking about a client or two in your head throughout this pitch who you'd like to actually take this output and to test it on throughout the presentation. The one ask that from us that we leave with you today is that you actually take your learnings from today and choose one client for every person in the agency who has attended this, and try to apply it to them. That way, what we can look to do between myself and Rachel is to follow up with one-to-one sessions to offer further support on pitches created as a result of this workshop. That way we can look to add things or to take things away and really refine them, and then bring them to your clients, where we can look to add in additional support from your international growth specialist team, as well as then start to loop in those operations consultants when those opportunities present themselves as well. So once again, thank you very, very much for attending, and we really do hope that you found it beneficial. We're really looking forward to your feedback, and we will speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.